Hello all and welcome back to my channel, Rover Turbo. In this video is going to be a how-to video on how to take an engine out of a Vauxhall Corsa D, a 3-cylinder 1 litre Vauxhall Corsa D engine. Because it's a 3-cylinder, there's lots of room basically on one side, so the idea is you don't have to disconnect any of the suspension, any of the drive shafts, any of the steering linkages. Basically you just unbolt the bolts around the gearbox, an engine mount, some water pipes and some hoses, and the whole lot comes out without having to do anything like that. So that's what this video is going to be, step by step, me going through taking the engine out. Now if this is handy to you, please click the like button, subscribe if you want to follow along for more videos. There's lots of videos in my playlist about stuff that I've done, so I'm not going to babble on too much longer and crack straight on with how to. Right, I'm just working my way methodically through. It's quite easy and straightforward once you get it and you look at it. It's remembering where everything goes. That's not the killer. That's the thing you need to be careful of. So my idea is that the wiring loom on the engine is going to stay on the engine. So we've got the main wiring loom here, which comes off the back of the engine here, which is connected to the ECU, and there's an earth down there. So disconnect that 10mm, disconnect the earth, disconnect that, and that will go with the engine. Took the battery tray out, various clips and stuff like that, so they all came off. And then we've got various coolant hoses and stuff like that. But I've taken the airbox out and this tube here just to make a little bit more room. Obviously we've got the wiring and stuff we have to disconnect from that, and the tube that goes across here with some Jubilee clips. And then we've got a crankcase vent which goes across from this pipe onto here, so that needs to come out. I've taken out the washer bottle, one pipe there, 8mm on there, and it just pops out. The airbox just pops out, some rubber grommets, nothing fixes in the airbox. Taking the battery tray out, it's just got some 13mm bolts in the bottom of the battery tray which bolt onto this. And then obviously we've got the wiring and stuff like that. All of these all clip to the side, and all these clips to the to the battery box, they all have to be unclipped. The ECU is off. This is the wiring loom which is going to stay with the engine. So obviously these just all unplug. This goes onto the earth down there, just have to undo that. We've got another cable here which comes from the starter motor. We've got an earth here which goes onto the post down here, which is an earth post. And then we've got two 13mm nuts on this. One goes to the fuse box, which goes on top of there, and then the other wire is this one here, which is a main fuse which goes onto there. So once you disconnect that, that can all stay with the engine and goes down to the starter motor. Okay, so we don't need to do any gear linkage cables, we don't need to do any drive shafts, we don't need to do any of that. So obviously I'm going to need to support the gearbox, otherwise it might sort of go all limp on me. So, and it's just a matter of disconnecting hoses. The heater hoses need to be disconnected. These hoses need to be disconnected. I've sprayed some WD-40 in there because they're a bit hard to get out, and I've got this hooked pick which helps get in behind, and you can run it around the inside carefully just to get rid of the sort of the adhesion that they seem to stick onto the pipes. The exhaust is obviously, hopefully I can undo those 4 bolts from the exhaust and leave the exhaust in situ. So I've got all of the hoses off here. The return hose for the heater is back here. The other return hose for the heater is here. I've disconnected the fuel line and just popped it up over here. You have to pull back these 2 blue tabs to unlock it, and then you push that white bit in the top and it just pops off. We've got this return or whatever it is that goes back, so that needs to be disconnected. That's a bit of a pain. You have to kind of disconnect all of the clips up here, and you have to rotate it and push in this tab at the top here, this little grey tab. You just have to push that right in and it just pulls off. This yellow thing is a red herring. I've no idea what that is, but I've had this before where you get confused by this and think what the hell, but it's actually the tab there that you push, and then that allows that to pop off. Another line here which connects to the back here somewhere. I'm not sure, I think it's a purge, but I'm not quite sure exactly how that comes off and what comes off of where and what I can leave on, etc, etc, because I can't even see that back there. So I think that's the last thing, that's just for the purge solenoid, which vents back to the tank. So that's that. So once I've disconnected that, I think it's just the exhaust. I've also got a problem with the aircon pump because I think it's got gas in it. I'm not sure, but I think it has. So I'm going to try and take the belt off, disconnect the 3 bolts on the aircon pump and leave the aircon pump in situ. So leave the aircon pump still charged up and just strap it away, and then just leave the aircon and the gas and everything. Right, so that was a bit of a faff. So what I needed to do was unplug the connector from the purge, which means I could see the pipe and I could see that there was a green tab on the bottom, but I couldn't get anything on it to push it in far enough to pop it out. So what I did is this just clips, this just slots onto this little tag here, and then it just pushes into the back of the inlet manifold. So what I did is I popped it off the back of the inlet manifold, popped it off of the mount in there, pulled it out here, and I managed to then get my finger on that green tab and then popped it off. So obviously this will go back in situ. One more thing, one of these hoses, the heater hoses, was clipped to the back of the inlet manifold. So that just unclips and then the hose just pops out. So that was one more thing that was connected. So we've got these 3 bolts with the downpipe bolts to the cat. So one of them I had to hammer on a 12 and the other 2 were 13. So I wire brushed them up, gave them a bit of a wire brush, sprayed with WD-40, got my gun on it, and they came undone relatively easy. So that's the downpipe off. Probably going to have to disconnect the lambda because I'm assuming, you can't even see that there, goes to the engine loom. I haven't really got underneath properly yet, but this stabiliser bar, I think that's part of the bolt what bolts to the gearbox, so I don't think the actual engine is stabilised. So I just need to check. So yeah, so that's probably, I think that's connected up the back of the engine, so I need to get right under to do that. Drain the oil out of it, been underneath and loosened the gearbox stabiliser mount, but it does look like that bolts to the engine. So I've undone all of the bolts around the back that I can find that go through the engine into the gearbox and from the gearbox into the engine. And then the connector for the lambda, which is going to stay in the exhaust, that just unplugs from a bracket at the back. I've also unbolted the aircon compressor. What I need to do now is consider getting the gearbox supported from underneath with the jack, because it's, I think, supported at the back with the stabiliser mount. Jack it up at the front and get a crane on here to take off that engine mount. In theory, after I've undone a few more bolts around this side, it's ready to come out. Right, so this is the same day, so just in case you were all wondering, I just decided to just fuck it and go for it. So I've taken off this panel windscreen wipers off, this off, the top bit just unclips, the bottom bit unscrews with loads of 8mm bolts. Then that comes off, which then allows that to, because obviously it's got to come, I might have to take the bonnet off. I've taken the engine mount off, so I haven't done these bolts onto the chassis rail, and then undo these 2 bolts which bolt into this, and then undo these 3 bolts which bolt into the side of the engine. So this isn't ideal how I've got this, and I am going to struggle and I'm going to regret not putting something down, but I haven't got anything, so I'm just hoping that with a bit of brute force and ignorance it's going to come out. It's got to come out. So I've got a few more bolts to undo on the gearbox, and hopefully it should come free and I should be able to pull it away from the gearbox. That is the plan. Right, so I've put an axle stand underneath the gearbox. It's not actually touching the gearbox, but hopefully it will catch it. It's already started to come away, so I just need to get the lever bar and basically just start teasing the engine away. There you go. So it's now apart. The gearbox has dropped down onto the axle stand. So I just need to push it away a little bit more. So I think I'm going to hit the bonnet. So I think I'm going to have to take that off. Because there's no way that's going to come out completely. So I'm going to have to take the bonnet off. What I might do, as I don't need to get underneath anymore, is put this back on the ground. It will just make it a lot easier to get it out. Sorry, I'm not even pointing at what I'm doing. To get it out and to pull it. It's going to be a bit of a pain to try and undo that myself, but we'll put some rags in the corner and hopefully we can just whip that off. So whip the bonnet off. I seem to remember the last time I did this, it was on a 4-cylinder one. It came very, very close to here. I think we took the throttle body off because these pipes were sticking out. I think we're probably going to clear it because we're not actually touching anything yet. I have a feeling that when it passes this box it's going to go but yeah, I mean, it's basically out, isn't it, really? So yes you can remove the engine without removing the gearbox on one of these cars. You got to give me credit with doing this one hand, didn't you? It's very tight. It's very tight. Ideally, I could do with another pair of hands. The difficult bit is going to be moving the crane away. Anyway, I think you get the idea. It's coming out. Right, I need to sort of guide this now as it's going to start swinging about, so I'll cut back in when I get it out. Right, so there you go. That is the engine out of the car. I did not need to remove the starter motor bolts. They are not long enough to go through to the gearbox. So I did not need to remove the alternator, so that's something for you to watch out for. You don't need to remove, I loosened all these bolts off before I stopped and thought, well, do I actually need to remove that mount? You don't. Did me loosening them help me get it out? I don't know. I'm probably going to do them back up before I put the gearbox, sorry, the engine back in. so then that is sort of more in its correct orientation. Because I would have thought that putting the engine back in is trying to get it mated back up to the gearbox without flapping about is going to be, you know, one of the most difficult bits to do of the whole job. So obviously the aircon compressor is there. So yeah, it was pretty straightforward really, with filming and stuff. So that's the engine out. Right, so that's it. That's the end of this video on how to take the engine out of a Corsa. The next video will be me stripping the engine down, getting the head off and trying to investigate exactly what's gone on with the engine, whether I do the head gasket, replace the engine. I've had a look on eBay and you can get a complete refurbished head, second-hand head, or refurbished for 300 odd quid. I don't know whether it's just better off getting that than rather than getting this skimmed. I've looked at heads, that second-hand heads are like 250 quid, 200 quid. £100, £150 difference doesn't sound like a lot for actually a head that, you know, in theory should be just bolt straight on rather than having to, work it out. So right, well that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.